Thank you. It's great to see all of you here today and really an honor to be with you. I'm going to make sure I know how to use the mouse here. Yeah. So a few things I want to talk about is just what is centered leadership? Why did it come about? Want to spend a little bit of time for all of you thinking about how you might apply it, and hopefully all of you will have a little bit of a takeaway. This is normally a 2 to 3 day program for us, so you can imagine what we're cramming into an hour. So have patience as we are doing kind of the tasting menu, and I'll take it away from you just as you're taking the tasty bite and figuring out what you're eating. So centered leadership really came about. We asked the question, we said, there are a set of women who are both happy and successful. And what enables them to have that marriage? And it started as a women's-based research program. Turns out, and probably not surprising once you actually see what this is, it's applicable to all of us. There are gender differences in terms of what women struggle with more versus men. But it did start with this: who are these women that are both self-reportedly happy in their lives and we can see from their leadership roles successful? So out of that came this set of women, and we did extensive interviews with them. And we said, tell us your stories. What are your practices? What do you do day to day? What are your challenges that you face? We met with academics, we worked with universities, we launched surveys. And out of all of this came what we think are the 5 themes that we call centered leadership. So let me walk you through each of these. And these are not so much meant to be a framework as what they are is they are the dimensions that for us create the real toolkit. We wanted this to be very tangible, very tactical, and not so much of the theoretical. So I'll try to, again, with our limited time, translate it into hopefully something that all of you can take away today. So first of all, we have meaning. So meaning is really the heart of strengths married with purpose. So strengths, when I say strengths, I don't mean skills, but I mean really core strengths to you that make you unique. Maybe your friends, maybe your teams would know it better than you would immediately. But I think all of us kind of know, where do we really shine? What's that piece that's uniquely ours? And then that sense of purpose, how are we applying it in the world? And when those two are in line, we would say you have meaning in what you're doing. The second one is framing. So framing is, how do we handle adversity? How do we handle that difficult conversation that may trigger us? And how do we actually reframe to get a better outcome? To not have the outcome happen to us, but to actually help steer that outcome and manage our own emotions, reactions, and responses. Third is energizing. This may or may not be surprising to all of you. This is one of them that we found most challenging, that the women found most challenging themselves. So energizing is not race and sprint through the week and then recover on the weekend, sleep 12 hours, see your friends and energize, or take a 2-week vacation each year. This is really about, how do you manage your energy in 90-minute cycles? How are you aware of how you're feeling? How are you integrating those energizers into your day? So it's at a much more day-to-day, hour-to-hour level than maybe sometimes we think about our energy. Fourth, connecting. So connecting is really about our relationships and taking a fostering and growth-oriented mindset to our relationships. So this is not just a static Rolodex, how many people do you have in your contacts, but this is a reciprocal relationship that you have with a set of people. You are clear what purpose these relationships serve in helping you, and you are clear on perhaps how you're helping them, and you're fostering and growing them accordingly. So do you feel this sense of connection to some group of people helping you get where you're trying to get, and do you understand how they're helping you do that? And then last is engaging. So engaging is really all of these coming together. And engaging is, are you able to take that step that feels perhaps a little too risky, a little too uncomfortable? Can you hear those voices that say, don't do it? but you can manage them enough that you hear the voices that say, do it. And so all of these pieces are very self-reinforcing. I mean, in general, if you have meaning, you tend to be much more energized. And all of these kind of fuel each other in a little bit of a self-fulfilling cycle, if you will. Now, what's at the heart of all of these dimensions is self-awareness. So it's one thing to know that these exist. The only way that these become powerful, the only way that these help unlock happiness, success, whatever you want to define, is if you are aware. You are aware of what your energizers are. You are aware of how you connect to people and who they are. What are your triggers? What are your fears? So all of the work that we do, it's one thing to identify these. The real work and the exciting piece comes when we actually become self-aware. So this is what we were alluding to. We're gonna try a little bit of an experiment because I can't show you the video. This is, I'll turn it around for a bonus for those of you who dared towards the front, can maybe see it. But you should all be able to hear it. And this is, it's just a few minutes against each of these dimensions. And it's actually excerpts from the interviews that we did with the women as part of the original research. So if this doesn't end up working, we can stop it, but we'll try it.
I was a national champion at the age of 13, but I started training when I was 10, and I was a bench player. I was always a tea lady for the first 3 years. Actually, I was not a very competitive person at all when I was in school. And then, you know, by sitting there and watching other people win, and then the applause and the stand-up ovation, all of that was quite inspiring. So I said, maybe that's a good feeling. Maybe I should try harder. So I tried harder.
The energy is the people I work with. When I connect with someone in the orchestra, I see his or her eyes, and we're in the same place, and it's just there. For me, that's it. You're communicating with that person at a different level that is totally pure. When that happens in the whole group at the same time, that's when you really start feeling that music truly can change the world.
So this goes on to framing for those of you who can't see it.
Upset every time a newspaper columnist said something negative about you, or
this is the Prime Minister of Australia.
A voter came and said they didn't think you'd done the right thing, or you saw a cartoon that made your nose ginormous, which happens to me every day of the week. If you're worried about that, then you wouldn't get through it.
You walk into a meeting, you're a black female. I mean, these are white executives. They look at you and they think, she doesn't know anything. There's absolutely nothing she can help me with. And I remember specifically one of the clients was actually quite rude and didn't think I would be able to perform, and he didn't relate to me very well in the meeting, but I just responded politely. After the meeting, he actually made a few phone calls to me, screamed at me over the phone, you don't know what you're doing, you're this, that, and the other. But I maintained my cool, and I just responded in the manner that I thought I should, and put the phone down. Lo and behold, my managing director came to me with a letter saying, the client was so impressed by you. He said he let loose, but you were very calm and you maintained yourself, and you still managed to execute.
This is connecting.
What I bring more now in the equation is the emotional intelligence.
Chairman, CEO of Avon.
This kind of change. The very same people that didn't think we could do it, who could do it. And that took a lot of 1 step forward, 5 step back. We'd get a little bit there, then there would be passive resistance. I would realize that I really never got them emotionally engaged, and realize that in small nuances. And over a period of time, when you wake up one morning and say, aha, no one's really doing this.
Command and control is not my style at all. And I think
Director General from MI5.
Run businesses work on this command and control basis. I think it's a huge mistake, actually, because it means that you're not benefiting from the advice of people who have got something to offer.
When I was a second-year associate, I was working for a consumer products company, and the chairman called one of the managing directors at the time and said, we need a woman in the boardroom. and we want her to present because we're a women's consumer products company and that's important to us. And so he said, okay, you're going to present. I'd never been in a boardroom, let alone present in a boardroom, and I was petrified. And he said, well, sink or swim, you're in, go. And it was awesome. He took a risk on me.
Engaging.
I just love a debate. And the best thing that happens is when a first-year lawyer comes and starts arguing with you on a legal proposition, and he holds his own, sentence for sentence. And they see that bubbliness in me when that happens. And there's an enthusiasm that they recognize, and it's quite infectious.
Challenges must be there. Obstacles must be there. But you must be determined that, look, this is a challenge before me and I'm going to cross over it. It is when you cross over it that you get promoted to the next level. But so long as you don't cross it, well, it stands as a mountain before you.
I'd say trust your intuition and talk to the people that you really care about in the short term, but also in the long term, and find out what they think about it. Shake it up and decide for yourself.
Energizing.
I was chairman of Qantas when September the 11th happened, and our major competitor failed, and there was 110,000 Australians stranded all over Australia. So that's stress and complexity. And I can remember in the middle of all of that, I went home one night and decided I would prune my plum tree. Now, I have never pruned a plum tree, but I got home, that's what I felt like doing. So I got out the ladder and I got the secateurs and I attacked this tree. Till my husband came home and like 2/3 of the tree was on the ground. And what are you doing? And I really didn't know what I was doing, but I had so much sort of built up tension that it was a great release.
Like when I'm producing a body of work, it starts like these little tributaries and little rivers, and then slowly they sort of come together. And at some point, this massive river starts to just rush along and take me with it. And I know when it is. I know I'm doing the right thing at that point. And I get really, really, like I feel it now. It's like I get goosebumps because it feels like something else has taken over and it's bigger than me. And those are really happy moments.
All right. So really, the idea of this is just to bring to life that these pieces manifest themselves very differently for everyone. And again, it's about understanding for ourselves how these actually manifest. How do they actually block us? And how can we actually use these to unlock us and to move us in the direction that we want to go? So as part of that little tasting menu, if you will, today, I want to take us through just a little exercise against the first three. So we'll spend a little bit of time on meaning, then framing, and energizing. And then have you all think about what is one way, at least, that you can maybe start incorporating this into your day-to-day life. So let's talk a little bit about meaning. All right, so if we think about a moment when you felt really energized. So meaning, again, it's this notion of purpose and strength. And the hardest part about this is identifying our own key strengths. We all live, for the most part, in a deficit-based world where we could get a memo on our review that's 2 pages long, 1 3/4 pages is what we do so well. And then there's, a couple sentences there at the end about what we could do better. And I don't know about any of you, but my tendency has been to, parse apart the words of those last 2 lines and focus on, if only I could do that a little bit better. So we spend a lot more time on where we come up short than really unleashing our strengths. And there's a lot of research around that right now, the strength-based development. So let's spend a little bit of time for all of you to explore what is at least one of your really key and core strengths. So to do that, I want you to think about a moment that you're really proud of. When you think about it, you're in the flow of what that artist was just describing. You're in the river, it's happening, and you're really proud of what maybe you and a team accomplished. And I want you to think about, what were you doing during that time? What were you feeling during that time? What did you really appreciate about your team or those around you? And if I were to go interview them today, what did they appreciate about you in that role? So I just want you to take a quick moment each, think about that, and then find someone to just quickly do a 2-minute for each of you exchange of what were you doing? And if you don't know what your strength is, but you just know it was a really happy, proud moment, use your partner. Say, I don't know what exactly it was, but here's what we did and here's what I was really excited about. So just take a moment, and then I'll go ahead and cue you to find a partner to just quickly exchange. Really tap into what you were feeling and what was happening in behaviors. When you feel like you have your moment, go ahead and look around you. And spend about 2 minutes for each partner. I'll let you know when it's time to switch. And again, help your partners figure out what their strengths are if you see something they're not bringing up or they don't know. All right, when you are done, lots of strengths to be shared here. All right, everyone, we're going to come back together as a group. Love all the energy in the room. It's great. Who shared an experience that really illustrated a core strength you already knew that you had? More people, come on, get out there. Okay, few. Who through this started to maybe tap into or discover potentially something new with their partner? Anyone? A few? Yeah? Okay, great. Did anyone struggle to come up with a strength in that story? A lot of people's hands aren't up yet. I think it's I'm gonna have you do an exercise that might be a little bit uncomfortable right now, because one of the pieces that is really challenging, and this is a bigger challenge for women than for men, is to actually acknowledge and own our strengths. So when we're joining a new team, for example, or we're working with a new group, to actually say, hey, I'll take that project on. I'm actually, really great at that. Or I actually really love project management. I actually really love, fundraising. I'll get out there, whatever. So what I'd like you to do is just, if you need to move out of your area, that's fine. Just introduce yourself to someone in this room you don't know with your name, your role at Dish, and what your strength is. So if you just did it with your partner, just do it with someone new. Just practice owning that strength. All right, everyone. Lots of new friends in the room. Let's come back together. We'll start to close out the meaning piece. All right. This is the part where I take the yummy bite away and tell you it's time to move on. So was there anyone, who was it uncomfortable for to actually share the strength part? Kind of easier to talk about your name and role versus the strength. Did anyone find that? Yeah. It's uncomfortable. It's like first hurdle, figure out what it is. And then before you know it, you're facing another hurdle, which is to share it. As you reflect on your strengths, how many of you feel like you leverage truly your core strengths on at least a weekly, if not daily basis in what you do right now? It's great. How many of you think that there's opportunity to probably use them a little bit more or start using them if you're not? Also a pretty good number. We'll talk about this a little bit in the energizing, but one of the things we do when we go a lot deeper is obviously we do a lot more around what are really our strengths, what's the full profile, but then what are the ways, even, let's not talk about what job we have, but just in things that are in our control in our daily lives, there's usually a lot more ways that we can bring our strengths to life, give ourselves a lot more meaning and a lot more, just excited to hop out of bed when we're leveraging those strengths. So that was great. All right, let's move on to framing. So framing, again, is about this notion of identifying situations that are upsetting to us and finding ways to choose different outcomes, finding ways to help shape different outcomes. So what I want you all to do is think of a moment when maybe you weren't at your best. It perhaps was a challenging discussion between you and someone else, or perhaps a group. Maybe there's still some emotional energy there. It didn't go the way you wanted it to, and maybe your reaction was not what you wanted it to be. And if you think about that moment where things were okay, and suddenly they are not okay. Really focusing in that moment. What were you feeling? What were you maybe wanting the outcome to be, but not articulate? Were you thinking things that you weren't saying? Were there physical reactions? Were you becoming flush, nauseous, hot? And think about that moment for a second. Think about the situation, what your role was. What the emotions were, and what was the moment where it started to go off the rails and maybe never came back on, or at least maybe not in that setting. We're going to talk a little bit about the science behind this because there's a real chemical reaction happening here. But I am, again, going to have you pick someone else and just share a little bit about it. And this is, again, this is more about getting under what's really happening. And so hopefully, I'm not giving you guys very much time, but hopefully you're able to help each other by asking questions, what was really going on. And then we'll go into a little bit of the biology and what the real trick here is in managing these difficult situations. So go ahead and find someone. Please don't, I mean, probably all of us with these stories, we could spend a half hour talking about how wrong somebody was, or how messed up the situation was, or if only, again, spend 20 seconds on the setting. The real importance here is what was going on in you, and then that's what we'll focus on with the biology piece. We can come back together whenever you guys are ready. All right, let's come back and start to learn about what was going on in our brains during these moments. All right. Could anyone still feel the emotion retelling the story? Sometimes it's very easy to go right back, right? Hard to pull ourselves back. So what is happening here? So there's a lot going on, but there is a piece. Now, most scientists would say that this is actually part of our reptilian brain, that it actually perceives threats, and it cannot distinguish a physical threat from, for example, an emotional threat or a threat to our identity. So our brain takes in so much information, right? You see a pattern and you jump to a conclusion, and it's basically survival, frankly. I mean, if our brain literally had to process each piece of information, we wouldn't make it. But if you think about when it goes wrong, it is jumped to a conclusion, and we call it the amygdala hijack, where it actually releases enough adrenaline to shut down your neocortex, which is, the functioning part of your brain that can think logically and say, ooh, I might regret saying that later. And this is a 10-second period. So most people, it takes about 10 seconds for your neocortex to come back online. So all we're trying to manage is that 10-second bridge. Because most of us, when the amygdala takes over during that adrenaline rush, it is a fight, flight, or freeze response. And in those 10 seconds, very often, we are off to the races with one of those, and it is much harder to bring it back. How many of us are fight out of those, would you say? How many flight? Get out of the room, get out of the and how many freeze? You stay there, but you just shut down. Yeah. And then later, you're either thinking it right then or later you think of everything you should have said, right? So this notion that if you can ride it through, if you can recognize maybe some of those physical sensations, maybe it's a person that almost every conversation you have is triggering, right? We all have some of those. But can you recognize it going in or in that instant and actually stop yourself from doing anything for 10 seconds? So whatever it is, whether it's you breathe through it, whether you say, hey, little upset here, let's come back to this. And with more time, you work on exactly what those techniques are for each of you. But it's incredible when you think that it's 10 seconds and how biological this is, right? And all of the physical responses that come up. Is there anyone here that has a technique that they've found works for them to make sure they don't say something? Yeah?
Drinking water when that happens.
Drinking water. Great.
So just gulp down water, and that whole action of water going down, it just helps me calm
Yeah.
and not get into that fight or flight mode.
Yeah, that's great. So she was saying just the process of swallowing and letting the water go down buys you that 10 seconds. Yeah, that's great. Anyone else? Yeah.
If it's a form of written communication that has upset me in a way, I typically will lock my keyboard and walk off to the bathroom or something and then come back before I respond.
Yes. Yes, that's great. That's great. Or at least if you type something, walk away before you ever hit send, right? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Draft only. Don't even put the name in the two in case it goes somewhere, right? Anyone else have some good techniques?
Have your body and observe yourself without reaction.
Yeah, the ultimate meditative ability to be the observer of the situation. To know you're going to be fine. You don't need to get engaged. Yeah, that one's very powerful. Yeah, great. So, kind of spend some time thinking about what your triggers are. I'm sure you have multiple stories. What are the triggers? How can you start to recognize those going forward? And just play with some tricks. I mean, one very simple one is breathing. If you didn't have your water with you, right? You always have that. All of us can do it. And it's amazing, how our heart rate increases, our breath becomes more shallow, everything opposite of what we're supposed to do because our brain thinks that a snake is coming after us and going to strangle us. We can overpower that. We know that's not what's going to happen. So, okay. So let's move on to energizing. And again, these all do link together. So if you think about what is the framing and managing your energy, you've just come out of a discussion like that. You've still got a big meeting to do in an hour, a presentation. What are you going to do to get yourself back on track? How well do we understand what drains us and actually what replenishes us? And it sounds like for those of you who are in the talk in August, you guys spent some time on these concepts. But it's really important for us to know And it's not all physical. Most of us go to, oh, I do yoga, I step outside and do a walk, I eat well, and then I have more energy. Absolutely valid and very powerful, but there are a lot of other different types of energy. So in true energizing fashion, I'm going to have you stand up and you are going to make 3 introductions. So if you know someone and you're a hugger, you can hug. Otherwise, you can just high five as you say hi. And you want to introduce yourself. And the first time around, you are going to just pay that person a compliment. So brief, anything, compliment, boom. Then you're going to find someone else, and you're going to high five them or hug them, and you're going to tell them something that you love to do. Could be at work, your spare time, anything. And then the third one, I want you to find a third person and say 2 things that you are deeply grateful for. So think about that for a second. Think about what you love doing. Think about what you are deeply grateful for. And go meet 3 new people. Who feels like they have more energy than a couple minutes ago? Does anyone feel like they have less? It's kind of awkward to find people. Yeah. It's fine. It's good to know. Good to know what gives us energy and what doesn't. I'm sure there's more, but in our research, there have been 2 really big blocks to this notion of energizing. So one is just the 24/7 you're always on, right? You have a spare moment where you might do something energizing and the email pops through or the text message comes up, whatever it is, but this notion that we're always on, and it doesn't allow a lot of time and often isn't really valued, this notion of going to take a walk around the block. I mean, it's, there's studies that show smokers, despite, until the lung disease and all the other things take over, actually have lower heart rates and these different kind of health benefits because they're actually taking time every couple hours to go breathe deeply. Now imagine if you were doing that without the intoxicated air, right? So the notion, but if you were to get up as often as, someone who smokes and just say, I'm going to go step outside and breathe for a little while, right? It's not part of our normal, first of all, our own normal thought process, and then perhaps even accepted in how our work goes. I mean, if any of you pulled out your calendars, do you have, bathroom breaks and, re-energize myself 10-minute blocks in your calendar? Probably not. Instead, you're back to back and running from one place to another. And then the other is this false paradigm notion between the work-life balance. So the notion that home life is always energizing, work life is always draining. Not true, right? And it shouldn't be true if we're living in balance. But I think all of us have gotten home and, you'd give anything to get right back to the office and that meeting, depending on what's going on at home. And we've all had those great days at work where we leave and we just, we appreciate our job and our colleagues and we feel great about what we've done. So again, I would invite, to shift away from this paradigm, think of ourselves as integrated beings, which we are, and think about how we manage our energy throughout the day. So in that exercise, we hit on 4 different types of energy. So we hit on the body, we hit on the physical. We were up, we were moving, we were high-fiving or shaking hands or whatever it was, but we were in our body. So that's one piece. Another is mind. So I asked you to think about those things. A lot of people really like puzzles or challenging problems, or they'll pick up a Sudoku or a crossword in their spare time, and that's like a different way of thinking, and they like that, but it's re-energizing, right? Other people, they need their brain to shut off. That's the most energizing thing. So the heart, right, asked you to pay a compliment and to talk about something that you really like doing. So this is that notion of connecting with another person on an emotional level. That can be very re-energizing. Some people will have, for example, pictures of their family in their office, right? And they just have a horrible phone call, they hang up the phone and they look at the picture of someone who means something to them smiling, and you know, that's all it is. Or the wallpaper on your phone, every time you look at it, right? It's that instant of, oh yeah, you know, that's part of my life, and that brings energy. And then last is the spirit. So, you know, what is this thing that you are truly grateful for? What is this thing that perhaps goes beyond this moment? And some people are part of different communities and things, but most of us find some type of energy in thinking about deep gratitude and pieces beyond this exact moment, in whatever form that takes for each of you. So what are some, I'd love to hear, and for the group to benefit, I mean, what are some of the ways that you all in this room energize yourself through the day, or set your day right with some energy? Would anyone care to share? Yeah, great.
I think attitude is absolutely contagious, and so when I wake up in the morning, regardless of how many times I had to get up and, you know, take care of my son throughout the night, you know, regardless of how tired I am or whatever the case may be, I know that my attitude is going to infect everybody on my team, and so I just make a conscious decision, you know, when I leave the house in the morning, that I'm going to be in a good mood today, and I just put on some fun music and I drive to work, even if it's crappy traffic or whatever. But I just make up my mind that, like, today is going to be a good day, and it seems to work for me.
Yeah.
I know it probably wouldn't work for everybody.
Yeah, but you fake it till you make it kind of concept,
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Force the smile and it'll come.
Yeah.
That's great. What else do people, yeah?
I like to listen to comedy. It just puts me in a good mood if I'm in a bad mood, or even if I'm in an okay mood, it just gives me a lot of confidence and I feel great about myself.
That's great. Do you have like little clips, favorite clips that you'll listen to if you've had a really bad conversation?
Serious, so there's
Okay.
channel. I'll just listen to that.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
There's this app that I use. I find like when I like sweat and like I work out and stuff like that, like it makes me feel a lot better, like releasing tension. So in the morning, like there's this app that I use called 7-Minute Workout. And it's like 7 minutes, really easy. You can wake up and just do it in the morning right before you shower. I really like to do that, and it like, you know, like loosens me up in the morning and like gets me in a good attitude. So I really like it. I recommend it.
That's great. That's a great tip.
It's really good.
Yeah. Yeah. Depending on how sweaty you get, you could do that in the middle of the day too. Shut your office door and whatever it takes, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah, great. Was there another hand? Did I see another hand over here? Yeah.
I like to work out in the mornings, and it's hard because I sleep really late. I make sure like my lunch bag and my gym bag, everything's packed at night, and in the morning, right after I click the turn off my alarm, I also turn on the music to wake me up.
Great. Yeah. Music's powerful. I've definitely shut my door before and put on a good song and just danced like no one was watching. Yeah. Great. So, you know, experiment with some of these. Experiment with just observing your own energy. You know, you're in a room and it's like, oh gosh, I'm just not focused right now. I'm not digesting this, or I'm just kind of down. Instead of just pushing through it, try something. Get up, walk down the hall, pop your head into a colleague's office and just ask how their weekend was. I mean, whatever it is to break it, and experiment with those things, and keep your little toolkit of energizing. And again, have that self-awareness piece of knowing how your energy flows. In the interest of time, so what I want to do, we only have a couple minutes, but I really want you to all think about what is just one thing that resonated that you could try to do differently. Because the research here, we didn't spend very much time on it today, but the research is very powerful. And you know, the ability to really both be happy and successful leaders in whatever we're doing, right? I mean, it's kind of the ultimate. So if there's something about a difficult conversation coming up that maybe you want to handle differently, if there's a strength of yours that you want to start leveraging, if there's a way you can manage your energy, the piece about engaging, you know, is there something that you want to do that's kind of that risky, should I jump off the ledge? You know, who's your kitchen cabinet advisors you can bring around to get you where you need to be. But I would really like you to just take a moment right now and think of one, I won't make you share it, one very tangible thing. And if you feel comfortable sharing it with, you know, a colleague, someone you know, or someone in your life to help hold you accountable, I invite you to do so. That's a powerful tool. But all of these are things that literally this afternoon you could start to play with. If you want to write it down or whatever. And then I know I didn't leave a lot of time, but if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Would you recommend that book that was in the first?
Yeah, I mean, it goes into all of this just more deeply, but it is a great book. And it came out like right as all of the research came out, so it's maybe a few years old. But this stuff never gets outdated. So yeah, the Centered Leadership book, Joanna Barsh. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you all. I think, does Sam have a couple? Yeah, thank you all.